there, I'm Sherry Howell, the Brand Engagement Director for CenterEdge Software. And today we're going to talk about something that few people actually manage at the highest level, but everybody knows they need. And that's kind of that fraud prevention, cash control idea. So basically, you know how to make money, but what about keeping it? We're going to talk about understanding the main threats, building an ethical culture, implementing strong processes and why that's important, and then some other additional threats that you may face. So let's get started. First things first, where do you think that the biggest threats of fraud or theft, and I'll use those interchangeably, but where do you think those come from? Is it team members, thieves in the night, armed robbery, shoplifting? If you said team members, you'd be right. What percentage of theft do you think is committed by team members or employees? Some say 50%, but IAPA case study found that it was actually 85%, and I've read some other research that suggests that employee theft makes up to as much as 95% of all theft. So the bottom line is that it's a much bigger deal than I thought. I'm sure now what you really want to know is what percentage of my team would steal from me. There's a general rule in fraud prevention circles that's the 10-10-80 rule, and that says that 10% of people would never steal, 10% would steal always given the opportunity, and 80% can really be swayed either way. So if up to 80% can be swayed toward or against you, how do you think you can tip the scales in your favor? What do you think? Is it more processes or culture? Well, the bad news is that no process is foolproof. I've got some threats and process tips to give you, but more importantly, you need people with the conviction to follow them. But the good news is getting people to have the conviction is almost entirely within your control. And it's up to you to set the culture that sways the 80% in your favor. Because really, when thinking about all the threats to the revenue you make, there is no threat bigger than the one caused by a questionable culture. So let's look at the players in this particular game. So here's you. Here's how you see yourself. You take on all the risk, you invest in these beautiful parks and FECs and attractions, you dream up the programs, you pay the fees. You have to keep a delicate balance between revenue and profit, and somehow we kind of always think there could be more profit. You've got the weight of the world on your shoulders. But now, how do you think your team sees you when they're bringing in hundreds of transactions at the point of sale on a busy Saturday? Well, they see a little more like this. They think you're swimming in dough. Now, you and I know that that's not the case, but you have to understand that this is kind of that preconceived notion. So you've got that uphill battle kind of from the get-go. So the type of leaders that you and your team are is going to set the stage for the kind of dynamic that your team will have. There are lots of reasons why the 80% can be swayed against you. And two of the biggest ones that you can really affect are they do it out of spite or they do it out of opportunity. Now, your processes are going to help minimize that opportunity, but it's your culture that goes a long way to how they'll behave when presented with those opportunities. So consider this. Taking a look at her leadership style, do you think that she's a good leader or a bad leader? She's probably a tyrant who only cares about herself and her bottom line. So if you're like her, or your behavior suggests that you are, I think you're a lot more likely to have people steal from you out of spite. And if you're that same tyrant, how likely do you think it is that other staff will be willing to step up and do the right thing if they've witnessed something? A whole lot less likely. And so the reality is that the majority of theft that is discovered happens as a result of another team member speaking up. So maybe I'm in that 10% that would never steal, but I don't like the way you talked to me last week when I did something wrong. And so maybe I saw Jojo over there doing something that he shouldn't be doing, and I may not say anything because I think you reap what you sow. That's a whole lot more common than we would like to believe that it is. So you want to choose your leadership style wisely because what you value matters. Your level of integrity matters. Think about your core values. Do you have a core value of honesty in your facility? And if so, are you displaying that consistently day in and day out with your team? If you're not, or let me say this, whenever you're not, you're creating space for them to behave similarly during vulnerable situations. And that's in general, not just with cash. So thinking about the expectations that you have for your team members, you want them to not steal, show up on time, be in their uniform, right? But what about what they expect from you? Because they have expectations for you and you're either meeting them or not, which goes into that leadership of whether or not you're giving them what they need. Let's say you're trying to foster an I've got your back teamwork kind of a culture where we all trust and know that we can count on each other. But then you have a guest here at the front desk and she's railing at your cashier, Jimbo. You get called to handle the situation. You say, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I've handled this. I thought I had handled this a number of times with Jimbo. I'll deal with this severely. I'm so sorry. Here's your money back. No hard feelings. The guest is thrilled. Have you won or lost in this situation? Well, you've lost, right? Because you threw Jimbo under the bus. And Jimbo's thinking, well, what a jerk she is. But now, what if you do that and then afterwards you go to Jimbo privately and say, hey, no hard feelings. That guest was just angry. I was just trying to make her happy. You didn't do anything wrong. What do you think Jimbo's going to think now? He's probably going to think that you're either a liar because you just lied to the guest's face if that were the truth, or he's still thinking that you don't have integrity because you didn't tell the truth to the guest or you didn't do the right thing. Now, this may seem like an easy thing, but I was literally in a seminar where a longtime operator recently gave this as a proper service recovery moment. And so I think it's probably more common than you would expect. It's our jobs to have our team members back, and that goes to that expectations. If you want them to have each other's back, you got to have their back too. Of course, we've got to listen, understand, and empathize with our guests, but we also have to protect our team. And as leaders, we need to take more of the blame and less of the credit. And so maybe in this instance, it's something as simple as saying, I can understand completely how you feel. If I were in your place, Miss Guest, I might want my money back also. I'm sorry we seem to have gotten this wrong for you this time. Just that simple use of different language here can protect both your guests' happiness and your team members' trust. How you treat your staff matters, and how you treat others in front of your staff also matters because they are always watching and taking their cues from you. And the better you do both, the more likely you are to put a little weight on your side of the scale in your favor. You want to have that strong culture, and that strong culture is built through what I call your ethics. Your ethics are doing the right thing. It's that code of behaviors that follow the accepted rules, that also take into account the way others are impacted by our actions. It's integrity, telling the truth, and always doing what you say you will. It's incorruptibility. Now, I love this word incorruptibility, and I could have said honesty, but I think that incorruptibility is stronger, that it's following your ethical code despite attractive or less uncomfortable alternatives. Non-negotiable drive to your ethics. Transparency. You've got to be clear and on the up and up. You've got to remove the cloak. For so long, we'd hide our cash drawers away. We wouldn't let team members count their own banks. We had talking about our goals and our sales achievements, and that just perpetuates that Duck McScrooge, greedy monster facade. The more transparent you are about the processes, your goals, and your expectations, the more trust your team members will have in your business practices and your common goals. Mutual respect. That's having each other's back. It's in the way that we communicate, train, and interact with each other, and also with our guests. And then it's the discipline that says, hey, this is what we value, these are our processes, and we're non-negotiably unwilling to take shortcuts and circumvent those processes. Because it's easy to write the processes, but it's not always easy to have the discipline to make those processes happen day after day after day. And you may get them written, you've got to follow them, you've got to keep working at them. You've got to rewrite them and go back and adjust them. Lots of us have employee handbooks and processes that we wrote 10 years ago that we've never touched since. But you've got to have the discipline that says that you keep these fresh. I would just like to remind you that every single second of every single day, you're training somebody to do something. And so when building your code of behaviors, you have to be specific in every way, from how to sweep the floor to what constitutes stealing or not stealing. Some examples might include clocking in too early for a shift, or grabbing a bottle of water when team members know that they should be using the fountain drinks. Or do your managers or your children come in and get Tootsie Rolls out of the redemption bins? All of these transactions not only present a problem for inventory, but they too will create gray areas in your cash control. When it comes to processes, you have to not only put them in place, but also make it clear what they mean in real life. So your staff may not understand that overfilling a French fry order is stealing. That's why it's so important to clearly outline examples of what is acceptable and to communicate a zero tolerance policy for theft of any kind. But, it doesn't have to be a decree from on high. Training that comes in the form of fun helps create stickiness and future recall. So, perhaps during a lesson on fraud prevention or even in team member orientation, you could break up the presentation with a game like Steal or No Steal, where you go over some of these examples and the team has to tell you if they're stealing or not stealing. This will just help get everybody on the same page with you about what is and is not acceptable. Now let's look at outlining some of our key processes. So a few lessons learned. They need to begin at hiring and often. Setting your standards, just like your culture, has to begin in that initial process. Simon Sinek says that every decision you make is a piece of communication. So you've got to make it clear, again, that you've got that zero tolerance policy for theft. Your processes need to be clear and explicit with no room for gray area, and you have to be in position to follow them to the letter. Nothing hurts ability worse than having processes that you aren't willing to follow. You've got to create buy-in with your team. And that buy-in says, hey, safety is everybody's responsibility. We all want to have a safe environment, and having poor cash handling, poor fraud prevention processes makes us all at risk for theft and robbery and the like. We want to foster an open door policy so that no matter what, if you see something, please come say something. No hint of retaliation. The majority of theft is caught by another team member raising their hand. And then let them know that any investigations will be conducted swiftly and discreetly, and that your team members can keep their anonymity. And you have to be willing to do something about it. Your team is learning what you're really about. If you think you've got somebody in place now that's stealing from you, chances are the rest of your team sees it too. And they're making decisions about your leadership ability and about what's acceptable, and maybe being swayed toward or against stealing as well. Okay, so we've made our parameters for outlining our processes. Now let's set the stage for how to handle cash, and let's start with where it's kept. So if you take a look at this cash room, I can't see you, so maybe you can consider whether or not you have your safe in your office that looks like this. Consider what a room like this says about you. It says that you have no idea what's going on in your facility, that you probably wouldn't even notice if money went missing, and whoever has a cash room that looks like this isn't serious about cash control. This is part of the transparency component of an ethical culture. It's the part that says, I know what's going on in this facility, and I'm serious about cash control. At best, a cash room like this says that we're not taking this process very seriously. You shouldn't either. Your cash room should look a little bit more like this. It should be in a secure area for only that process. So we would recommend that you do not have it in your office, but that it's in a secure room for only one purpose. It should be minimally furnished. So a couple of chairs, a table, your safe, your bags, your trays, cash logs. You should have your cameras facing what happens on the table and also what happens in and out of the safe. Now, obviously, you're not going to want it to show the actual combination of the safe, and your room should lock automatically. You need to automate what you can and then systematize what you can't. So a few words about your safe. Bolt it down. Thieves breaking into your facility will try to access it, and if they can't, they'll try to take it entirely. I was at a seminar where a gal talked about how they had a break-in, and because the safe was bolted down, they didn't make off with the safe. It ought to be big enough for your banks, any change for the day, and your physical cash tray inserts that go in the drawer. That'll just be ready so that cash tray inserts can be locked up when team members are on break. We'd recommend keeping change consistent because, again, the more consistent you can be, the less likely you're going to have people getting mixed up about important details and something getting missed. Count the safe at every shift. The safe should always balance between the banks out in the park, those in the safe, and any change. At shift changes, managers balance and make necessary deposits, and any overages or shortages will go into or come out of the deposit. And so that looks a little bit like this. Let's say you've got $3,000 in change at any given day, and you know that you've got 5 banks out on the floor with each with $200 and 5 tray inserts in the safe ready for the next shift at $200 each. That means you've got $5,000 in motion in the facility at any given time. So at the end of the shift, anything over $5,000 is going to go into the bank deposit. Anything under is going to come from the bank deposit, because your safe should always balance. Now that we've set the standards for the cash itself, let's talk about creating clear accountability, because the best procedures are going to have that. And that starts with your managers. Here he is. Here's our manager. How many people do you think you should assign to your safe during a given shift? If you're thinking any more than one, you already have an issue with cash control. You absolutely, without a doubt, must limit access to your safe and cash tills. For each shift, we recommend that you assign one cash manager. This person is responsible for issuing all team member banks, giving out all change throughout a shift. They alone are responsible for the cash in the safe for their shift. Should team members buy and sell change from each other? Absolutely not. They'll be responsible for conducting team member cash drops to ensure a safe amount is in a team member's drawer at any time to help prevent loss during an incident. So the manager will come over, tell a team member it's time to conduct a cash drop. You can get a notification, maybe on your phones, saying that a particular station needs a cash drop. Both the team member and the manager sign the cash drop receipt. And one important note here is that the manager needs to go directly back to the safe. Don't go creating any gray areas in your park by letting team members see managers doing all kinds of other tasks while they're supposed to be conducting cash drops. It's unsafe and it's unwise. Now, you might think this is overkill, but you're setting up very black and white rules for how cash is handled. This shows team members not only that you follow the rules, but you have a complete handle on how cash is handled in your facility. At the start of the next shift, the safe is counted out in the cash room by both the starting cash manager and the closing or next cash manager. And then he'll go make the deposit for his shift. And we would recommend that you make a deposit for each shift. And that leads us to team member accountability. Looking at cashiers. For each team member, how many people should have access to their drawer? You probably think one by now. So you would be right. What does their day look like? Well, the team member's going to go to the cash room, and with the cash manager there, they'll confirm the amount and sign off. Then they'll be escorted over to their station to begin their day. A best practice is that a team member should never move through your park or facility unescorted with cash. Not only is it safer, but it also shows them just how serious this is in your business and how important the process is. Now you might be thinking, but wait, Sherry, we like to get our team members' banks in the morning all set up and put them in the drawer. And that's fine, and you can do that. However, let's say that I put $200 in the drawer before your shift. You come up to your point of sale station, you count your bank and decide that I've put $170 in the bank. Who's responsible? Nobody is responsible, in fact, because without that clear accountability of us doing it together, it's my word against yours, and therefore nobody's responsible. Without a clear process, you don't have accountability. So your team member works their shift as the only one who accesses their drawer and their till. What happens when a team member goes on break? Your breaker will come and bring their own till, which is really, in software speak, is the record of transactions. They'll bring their own bank tray and insert with them when they come to relieve their teammate. They'll drop theirs in the drawer, log in with their own unique ID, and never touch their colleagues' cash and transactions. So the best way to do that is to have stackable or dual side-by-side cash drawers so that you don't have to walk around with cash drawers. However, you can accomplish this with having team member bank drawers locked up in your safe, remember the safe being big enough, while a team member is on break. At the end of their shift, the manager comes over, helps them cash out, bags up all of the receipts, the till report, and all the media that they took in, and escorts your team member back to the cash room. pull the tray insert, and otherwise leave it open. You may have seen a video in the news not long ago where two thieves broke into an entertainment facility to rob it. They ended up yanking the drawer right out of the point of sale station. Now, the cash drawer was safely locked in the safe, so they got an empty drawer. However, they wouldn't have even done that kind of damage if they had seen that the drawer was popped out to show that it was empty. And once in the cash room, you're counting out the drawer together. You're reconciling voids, discounts, and all the other media. You can match up your returns with their receipts and check who was given refunds and for what reason. And we'll talk more about refunds in a few minutes. Now, for what circumstances should you use manager overrides in your system? You probably guessed that that's a trick question. There's really no time when you should do that. If you allow any access to anyone else inside a team member's drawer, you have lost the drawer's integrity. You've created an exception to the rule. And again, you've created a gray area of when it's appropriate to change or go around the rules. In life, there are lots of gray areas, not so much in cash control. Even if a team member goes rogue and walks out on a shift, you've got the key to their drawer and other measures to take that do not include creating exceptions in your cash control. Now, at the point of sale, there's a couple of other cash handling tips that I want to give you. Face all the bills in the drawer so that they're going in the same direction to make it easy to see when one is out of place and avoid mistakes. Dock bills before putting them in the cash drawer at the end of a transaction so that you don't have a guest saying, no, I gave you a 20, no, you gave me a 10, and just avoid all of that. Make sure the drawers close after every transaction. People will steal by leaving the drawer open and then voiding transactions out. And have security cameras pointing at your point of sale and the guest side so that they can see the entire process. Make sure that you are ringing up all transactions. How many times have you as a manager or an owner gone to the kitchen and said, hey, make me a pizza? That creates a gray area. That tells team members it's okay for them to do the same thing. So make sure all transactions, even for you, for your family, get rung up. Get rid of that take a penny cup. Let the drawers, good or bad, speak for themselves. Have a cash handling agreement in place for when there's an overage or a shortage. And again, follow it to the letter. But what about with guests? Do you think there are vulnerabilities you've got when you've got guests inside your facility? Well, unfortunately, you do. So what's the key to reducing loss caused by shoplifting and property damage? Well, in my opinion, it's exceptional guest service. It sounds counterintuitive, right? You give more to prevent stealing? Well, kind of. Thinking about in your cafes, in your redemption or merchandise space, you're at risk for shoplifting and property damage. And how do you combat that? With attentiveness. We've all been to a store where the staff practically stalk you and making you feel like a criminal just for admiring a sweater. And nobody's talking about that. Often, people doing shady things exhibit noticeably shady behavior. So train your staff to be on the lookout for cues and signs, just like you would in any normal guest experience situation. Normally, you'd be on the lookout for who looks lost, who looks confused, who looks angry, so that you can attempt to help them. People who are about to attempt something nefarious are likely to show signs of nervousness. Maybe they'll look around a lot more. They'll move with unusually fast or slow movements. Now, obviously, it should always go without saying that you can't profile people. You need to treat everybody with the same amount of respect and awesome service like you normally would. Greet them with a smile, make eye contact, exchange names with them, introduce yourself. If you think about just the act of introducing yourself and exchanging names, you're already going to reduce some theft. People will be less inclined to steal from you, not only because you interacted with them kindly, but let's face it, you'd be able to finger them for the theft. And nobody wants that, right? Make it difficult for them to steal from you so that they then go and steal from somebody else down the road. Or maybe they'll just see the light and change their ways forever. Wouldn't that be fabulous? In your facility, you want to eliminate blind spots where people can tuck in and commit untoward acts like stealing merchandise or vandalizing your property or any other shameless things that people get up to in hidden areas. Then if you use wristband colors for jump tickets or other timed attractions, vary the colors day to day so that people can't easily reuse their bands. Similarly, having the dates printed on them is important, and having staff spot check and look at bands to make sure that they're used appropriately at your different attractions. And then one more process that can cause a lot of theft happens in your inventory. So the things that you should be tracking inventory are, redemption items, food and beverage, retail items, party supplies, really any tangible item. There are some best practices here, and that starts with managing who takes in inventory versus who processes checks or payments for it. Avoid team members getting kickbacks by making sure that all payments, checks, and rebates go back to a set address, maybe outside the facility that you have access to. And then spot check from time to time with your vendors that that's happening as it's intended. When you receive inventory, compare packing lists with what's actually received, checking those receipts. A lot of vendors are going to give you digital packing lists now, which you can cross-reference maybe on a mobile point of sale station, for example, where you can literally take in the inventory at the same time it actually arrives and make that process just a whole lot faster. And then when it comes down to conducting regular inventory audits, making sure that you're doing consistent inventory checks. Maybe it's all inventory every week, or maybe that's not something that you can really handle now, but maybe every week you consistently spot check 2 or 3 items. Now, how many team members should be doing that? So maybe pick 2 or 3 items each week, and Jasmine and Mike this week are going to count the number of items. Of course, they're not going to do it together, but they'll kind of go behind each other, and then you go behind them. And then the same thing goes, maybe one day you count it and have them go behind you, all at different times, just to show that, hey, you know what, I might make mistakes. We're all in this together. We need to keep each other on track and accurate. Not only are you auditing the things that are tangible in your facility, but think about those other items that can go missing, like parts and tools, light bulbs. I recently had a gal say people were stealing toilet paper out of her facility. Anything that can be more universally used outside your facility can be at risk. So check to see how often you are having to reorder that kind of stuff. So now that we've talked about the different processes in the different areas of your facility, there are some additional thefts that you may end up seeing. And so just to show you some of the common ones that we have seen, the most common threats are the misuse of discounts and coupons. So people have been seen applying discounts and coupons and pocketing the difference, or using my team member discount for my friends, or even false transactions for teammates. You want to combat those maybe by barcoding all your coupons, reviewing the discounts in a team member's till at cash out, or reviewing the discount reports by team member in your facility management software, and of course, spot checking shift meal receipts in your park. So you can go back and check to make sure that the chicken fingers and fries are what they actually paid for versus maybe they paid for a slice and got a whole pizza. Other things at the front line, voiding transactions after a guest has paid. Combat that to having receipts printed or emailed to guests. Maybe you spot check your void reports to see if a team member is conducting an inordinate amount of voids. We've seen people conducting false returns and then pocketing the cash. To combat that, require that guest names and phone numbers have to be filled out on a return receipt, and then actually give them a call. Not only will this help you minimize team member abuse, but it will also offer you a guest service recovery opportunity to see how they felt about the resolution of their refund or return. And of course, you can also restrict access to who can void and return transactions. However, this can be problematic when thinking about your manager's time out on the floor and whether it's entirely practical to have them conducting all those types of returns. You have to kind of manage that ease of use inside your facility in the real world. And then some other higher level employee threats, because the ones that are done at the higher level can be considerably more costly. And these are things like supervisors or managers with general manager access, falsifying login information to run transactions under aliases, even so much as creating fictitious employees entirely. You need to be comparing or spot checking end of day reports against employee schedules to see, was everybody who was scheduled to be on shift actually the ones we have tills for and transactions for? Check your audit logs when you think that there's something going on to determine if there was a record change and who did it. And then for those of you who have game rooms, we've seen things like giving away unused card balances or swiping a team member card for free games for friends or family. So combat that by, number one, making sure that they understand that giving away unused card balances is stealing. Review team member card transaction reports to see if there's an inordinate amount of games going out for free. And then once you suspect theft of that type, reviewing your security footage to confirm. And finally, it should go without saying that moving cash around your facility needs to be considered carefully. So some of our best practices include varying your times. So don't conduct all your cash drops at the same time. Maybe set your point of sale to notify you when a particular station reaches a certain amount so that you're doing it at different times. Vary the routes inside your facility to and from the different stations, and also to and from the bank when you're doing your deposits. Use an inconspicuous method. Don't run around with a big bag with a big money sign on it or a traditional cash bag. Use backpacks or lunch boxes from your redemption counter. And then using codes for change requests. It's never a good thing if a team member's yelling out, hey, I need more ones, I have too many $100 bills. Okay, so I hope you're not now seeing peril everywhere and giving everybody the side eye when you get back to your desk. Remember that if you create a strong team culture, the culture creates the conviction. The conviction makes people want to follow processes. Your processes are going to minimize your threats, and you need to inspect what you expect so that you can get back to the business of having fun. And if you want to know more, we wrote a secret to streamline cash management document that you are welcome to get. Just go to our website or reach out to us at showell@CenterEdgeSoftware.com. Have a great day.